The galaxy remembers many wars, but none as bitter, as relentless, as the Shattering. For 1,000 years, two civilizations clashed across the stars. The Keldorians, armored in crystalline exoskeletons, their voices like grinding tectonic plates, and the Vaethari, ethereal beings of bioluminescent gas whose songs could shatter asteroids. Their feud began over a misunderstanding, a stolen relic, a misinterpreted gesture. But it escalated into a cycle of vengeance so deep that neither side could recall the first blow. Generations lived and died, knowing only hatred. Planets were scorched, moons turned to prisons, and children taught to mourn ancestors they had never met. War was no longer a choice. It was a creed. Then came the poet. They arrived on the neutral trading world of Cygnus Prime, a backwater station where both species reluctantly shared space. No one knew their origin, only that they wore a tattered cloak, carried no weapons, and spoke in a language that seemed to bypass translators entirely. Their words were not heard, but felt. At first, the crowds ignored them. War poets were common in the galaxy after all, and most preached empty platitudes about peace. But this one was different. They did not plead, they did not accuse. They simply remembered. The first poem was called The Child of Ash. It told of a Keldorian youngling clutching the smouldering remains of a parent's armor, not understanding why the sky wept fire. The second, The Song Unfinished, sang of a Vaethari elder dissolving mid-melody, their light snuffed out by a stray plasma burst. The poet's verses were not grand or ornate. They were sparse, honest, a mirror held up to a wound no one dared name. Word spread. Crowds grew. Keldorian soldiers, their crystalline hides still scarred from battle, stood shoulder to shoulder with Vaethari drifters, their gaseous forms flickering unease. The poems cut deeper than any blade. They spoke of the loneliness of centuries staring at the same stars, the weight of inherited grudges, the quiet shame of survivors who wondered, why them? Why not me? But the true revelation came during the recitation of the Garden of Silent Stones. The poem described a forgotten world where both species had once buried their dead side by side, long before the war. A place where Keldorian runes and Vaethari harmonies intertwined on memorials, mourning the same universal truth. All lives end. Only stories remain. As the poet's final syllable faded, a Keldorian commander, face etched with cracks from a recent skirmish, lowered their weapon and asked, "How do you know of this place?" "It was erased from our archives." The poet hesitated. Then they removed their cloak. Their body was neither crystalline nor gaseous. It was flesh, pale, soft, human, or so it seemed. But as the station's light hit their skin, faint markings shimmered, fractal patterns, ancient and alien. The crowd recoiled. This was no human. This was a Thalarin, a species presumed extinct. The Thalarin had been pacifists, mediators, scribes of history. They'd tried to stop the war in its early centuries and were annihilated for it. Their worlds glassed, their songs silenced, their existence reduced to a footnote in the very conflict they'd sought to prevent. The poet confessed they'd been found as a child, the lone survivor of a Thalarin escape pod, adrift in the wreckage of a battlefield. Their rescuers, a human freighter crew, assumed they were an orphaned human, their true biology masked by trauma-induced amnesia. Raised among humans, they had believed themselves one, until the poems began spilling out. Fragments of a past not theirs, yet deeply theirs. Memories of a people who'd dreamed of peace, died for it, and now screamed across time through the only vessel left. A soul who'd unknowingly inherited their purpose. Silence gripped the station. For the first time in centuries, Keldorians and Vaethari faced not just each other, but the echo of what they'd destroyed. The Thalarin had been a bridge. Now, their last descendant stood before them, a living monument to all the war had cost. The ceasefire began that night. not with treaties or surrenders, but with stories. Kaldorian and Vathari soldiers shared their own poems, their own laments. They traded names of the fallen, sang dirges in both grating stone and haunting mist. The galaxy watched, stunned, as entire battle fleets turned back from war zones. The poet? They vanished shortly after. Some say they wandered into the ruins of a Thalaran temple, finally at peace. Others claim they're still out there, a ghost guiding others to lay down their arms. But their legacy endures. On Cygnus Prime, a new garden grows where both species plant silent stones, not for their own dead, but for the Thalaran. And every year, on the anniversary of the poet's revelation, the war's end is marked not with victory chants, but with a single humbling phrase. Jia, we were the monsters. Now, we choose to be the mourners. The war is over. The healing has begun. And somewhere, in the dark between stars, a 1,000-year-old song finally finds its chorus.